Hey crystal lovers, and welcome to CCH program class 2, the metaphysics of crystal healing. In this section, we're talking all about crystal shapes. Now I want to start off by clarifying we're not talking about crystal systems here, and we're not talking about crystal formations. Things that you might have heard of like dows, channelers, celestials. We're saving that for another class called the Master Formations of Quartz. In this class, we're literally just talking about all of the different shapes that crystals can be cut or polished into. So crystals can actually be intentionally manipulated by tumbling them, cutting them, or polishing them to achieve various shapes. This actually alters the way in which the energy is emitted from the stone, but not the energetic qualities or the properties of the stone itself. So that means a rose quartz still has all the properties of a rose quartz, but the way that the energy comes out of that crystal will be different depending on its shape. Now, not all crystal healers agree with this, but I found through over 10 years of working with crystals that shape makes a big difference to the way that we receive and interpret the energy that we're experiencing. Some healers choose to only work with rough crystals or crystals that are in their natural state. These are also sometimes called raw crystals. These are crystals that are used just how they came from the earth. So be it a terminated point, a cluster, a geode, or just a rough chunk. But these are all known as different types of rough crystals. Now, some of these formations are what we'll be discussing in the Master Formations of Quartz class in our Advanced Crystal Practitioner program. But I do want to say that there are other healers out there that believe that because differences exist in the energetic vibrations of each person receiving healing, a considerate healer will have an assortment of different crystal shapes to better suit the specific needs of each individual. I fall into the second camp, if you couldn't figure that out yet. I think that the way that energy changes and shifts when a crystal's in a different shape really says a lot about how we can work with those energies. And because we're each so unique and we each have our own way of working with crystals and perceiving energy, I think that these different shapes can make it really helpful for us to connect with crystals in a deeper way. Now, if you're a purist and you only want to work with rough or raw crystals, I get it, and that's okay. That is your decision to make. The important thing to know here is there's no right or wrong, there's only what's comfortable for you. So let's start out by taking a look at tumbled stones. These are smooth, rounded stones that have been put through a process of tumbling with abrasive materials until they have a nice, smooth surface. When these are really tiny, they're often called chips, or when they're really large, like fist size, they're usually known as jumbo stones. Now, they're typically more inexpensive than a specimen piece, and they travel better than points or specimens because they're more durable and they're not easily breakable unless they're made from a really soft material. But they don't have those delicate points that you see in a lot of clusters or specimen pieces. These also have, in my opinion, a more subtle energy than rough stones. Now, this isn't to say that they're weaker necessarily. The energy is just less intense than in rough stones, and it tends to radiate from the center outward kind of evenly in all directions, making it really soothing and kind of easy to assimilate. This helps make it a really comfortable energy for people to work with when they're new to working with crystals, or, and many of you may identify this, for those who are generally sensitive to outside energies like empaths. Now, water-worn crystals are really similar to tumbled stones energetically. The only difference is that these were kind of tumbled by nature. So they don't have that high sheen, glossy surface that's exhibited by tumbled stones that have been through a mechanical tumbling process, but they are relatively smooth to the touch. Think about if you've ever been walking through a little creek or riverbed or picked up stones on the edge of a lake to skip them across the lake. They're nice and smooth, right? That's from the process of water washing over and over and over them again, smoothing out all the edges of the stones. So they're really similar to tumbled stones that way, and I feel like the energy moves through them in the same way. Now, getting back to those rough or raw stones that I mentioned earlier, These appear just as they were taken from the earth, and they often have rough or jagged surfaces, but they also might display a variety of crystal formations like points or clusters. Rough stones with no crystals are often just called chunks. So rough crystals are really powerful and their energy is really direct. It gets the job done super quickly and efficiently. But it's important to know that these stones might be too strong for some people, especially empaths or highly sensitive individuals. In this situation, tumbled stones might be a more suitable option to work with as they have a more gentle, subtle energy. So you might be thinking, well, Ashley, which is right, rough stones or tumbled stones? And the answer to this question really lies with the individual, and it depends on what you need, you or your client. So if you're newer to working with crystals, or if you're really sensitive to energy, then the soft, gentle way that energy moves from a tumbled stone might be a better fit for you. But if you really need that energetic breakthrough, you need something that kind of packs a punch, then a rough or raw crystal might be the right choice for you. So people often ask me the question, well, which is better though? Like, just tell me which is better. And even more frequently, people associate better with more powerful. And although I suppose that I would say rough stones feel more powerful because of the way the energy is emitted from them, more powerful or more forceful doesn't always mean better. Remember, if you're really sensitive to energy and you have that really forceful energy coming through, that's not going to feel better to you. It's going to feel a little overwhelming. So in certain circumstances, with empaths and people who are new to crystals or really sensitive to crystals, they might feel a little overwhelmed or a little uncomfortable with that kind of energy. How many of you have felt that way? Like, really, reach out and let me know over in the student group if you've had that experience where you started working with a crystal and it was just a little too much. Well, sometimes toning things down a little bit by working with a tumbled stone rather than a rough stone can help that. So how do you ultimately choose? How do you know whether you need that more gentle energy or you need something a little stronger, a little more forceful? Well, think about why you're working with this stone. Is it a really delicate matter, something like emotional healing, or are you trying to manifest prosperity and do it really quick? Your purpose and your intention should always be taken into account when you're choosing the shape to work with. Now, finally, as always with everything in this program, trust your intuition. I can lead you down the right path and I can share all this knowledge and wisdom with you, but ultimately you have to listen to your own inner guidance and inner knowing about what the right decision is, whether you're making that choice for you or for a client that you're working with. And here's the thing, worst case scenario, if you don't enjoy the shape that you're working with, you can always set it aside and try working with something else instead. Now, because some people will require those more gentle vibes and some people will need that more powerful energy to create a bigger shift, a considerate crystal worker will have both available. This crystal toolkit can be built over time. You don't have to rush out and buy multiples of every single crystal, making sure that you have a rough crystal and a tumbled crystal and a pyramid and a sphere in every single shape. But what you can do is slowly and consciously build a crystal toolkit. Do you feel intuitively called to work more deeply with your stones? To grow your confidence, knowledge, and connection to crystal energy beyond what you can learn on your own? Our award-winning Crystal Healing Certification Program will take you from crystal lover to a confident, certified crystal healer and help you discover your soul's path and crystal purpose. Maybe you want to deepen your personal spiritual practice by connecting more deeply to your stones. Or maybe you're already working with crystals, but you want to learn some more advanced energy healing techniques. Wherever you're at on your crystal journey, the Love and Light School's CCH program can help you become the confident and intuitive crystal healer you know you can be. Are you ready to listen to the nudges from the universe and take the next steps on your crystal journey? Our CCH program is here to support you every step of the way.